Welcome listeners to listen to the short story, Beneath the Shadow of the Birch Grove. In the boundless, often unforgiving, embrace of Mother Russia's vast plains, where the ancient rhythms of life unfurled in harmony with the ceaseless turning of the seasons, lay countless humble villages, each a microcosm of human existence, its inhabitants bound by the demanding toil of the land, by ancestral tradition, and by a faith as deep and unyielding as the soil itself. It is within such a village, Krasnoe, nestled amidst fertile fields and bordered by a venerable birch grove, that the life of Anna Ivanovna Volkov, a simple peasant woman, shall unfold before us, her journey, marked not by grand pronouncements or celebrated victories, but by the quiet endurance of unspoken sorrows and the profound beauty of subtle triumphs, offers a poignant testament to the human spirit's boundless capacity for resilience, its unwavering connection to family and faith, and its enduring strength, measured, like the very breath of life, by the inexorable passage of the seasons. Chapter 1. The Promise of Spring and a Young Heart's Hopes. The world, in the village of Zaryady, truly began its unfolding with the advent of spring. It was not a sudden, explosive burst of color, but a gradual, tender awakening, like a child stirring from a long, profound slumber. The crisp, clean air, still carrying the faint, lingering scent of melting snow, began to hum with the nascent energy of life. The fields, freed from their icy embrace, slowly shed their winter shroud, revealing patches of rich, dark earth, moist and eager beneath the pale, hopeful sky. And nowhere was this awakening more palpable, more acutely felt, than within the innocent, burgeoning heart of Anna Ivanovna Petrova, a girl then on the cusp of her 17th year, whose very spirit seemed inextricably intertwined with the tender unfolding of the season. Anna was not a creature of striking beauty in the conventional sense. Her features not sharp or commanding. Rather, her loveliness lay in a quiet harmony, a gentle grace that mirrored the soft contours of the landscape around her. Her hair, the color of ripe wheat, usually escaped from its braids in soft tendrils around a face that was often dusted with flour from the communal oven or streaked with earth from the garden. Her eyes, the deep, luminous brown of freshly turned soil, held a remarkable depth, an observant quietude that seemed to absorb every detail of the world around her, reflecting its subtle changes with an almost uncanny precision. These were not the eyes of a dreamer lost in fanciful illusions, but those of a soul deeply attuned to the tangible, practical realities of life, yet capable of perceiving the profound beauty and inherent goodness within them. Her connection to nature, particularly to the ancient, sprawling birch grove that bordered the village's eastern edge, was as fundamental to her being as the very blood that coursed through her veins. From her earliest childhood memories, the grove had been her sanctuary, her confidant, a place where the whispering leaves spoke a language she understood instinctively. In spring, she would spend hours beneath its nascent canopy, watching the tiny, delicate buds unfurl, feeling the soft stir of the earth beneath her bare feet. The silver-white bark of the birches, smooth and cool to her touch, felt like the skin of a living, breathing entity, its very essence intertwined with her own. Here, amidst the gentle rustling of leaves and the melodious chirping of unseen birds, her young heart would overflow with an unspoken joy, a profound sense of belonging that transcended words. It was in this grove that her earliest hopes and dreams took root. Nourished by the pure air and the gentle sunlight, Anna's understanding of love and life was, at this tender age, as innocent and unblemished as the first wildflowers that dotted the thawing meadows. It was an understanding gleaned not from grand tales or learned pronouncements, but from the simple, observed realities of Zaryady. Love was the unwavering devotion of her parents, Ivan Denisovich and Maria Nikolaevna, who, despite the relentless toil of their peasant lives, always found a moment for a gentle touch, a shared glance, a quiet word of comfort. It was in the communal spirit of the harvest, where neighbors helped neighbors without question, where shared laughter sweetened the arduous labor. Life, as she understood it, was the inevitable cycle of sowing and reaping, of birth and death, of joy and sorrow, all unfolding within the benevolent, guiding hand of God. Her faith, simple and unexamined, was as natural to her as breathing, an inherent part of the very fabric of her existence. woven into the warp and weft of daily life. Her family, the Petrova household, was a microcosm of Zariadi itself. Her father, Ivan Denisovich, was a man of immense physical strength and quiet integrity. His hands hardened by decades of communion with the soil. His face, weathered by sun and wind, was often stern in its concentration. Yet his eyes held a profound kindness, a deep, unwavering love for his family that shone through his taciturn nature. He was a pillar of the village, respected for his diligence, his fair dealings, and his unwavering adherence to tradition. Anna saw in him the embodiment of the peasant's virtues, perseverance, humility, and an unshakable connection to the land. Her mother, Maria Nikolaevna, was a woman of gentle spirit but formidable inner strength, her hands perpetually busy with the endless tasks of the izba and the kitchen garden. She was the hearthkeeper, the source of warmth and comfort, her voice a soft, melodic hum that filled their small home. Maria Nikolaevna taught Anna the countless skills a village woman must possess, the kneading of dough until it became a living thing under her hands, the intricate art of weaving, the preserving of berries and mushrooms, the meticulous tending of their small flock of chickens. But more than skills, she taught Anna by example, patience, compassion, and the quiet dignity of enduring hardship with an unyielding spirit. It was from her mother that Anna absorbed the most profound lessons about the unspoken endurance of women. The quiet triumphs achieved not through grand gestures, but through tireless devotion and unwavering love. Anna had two younger brothers, Mikhail and Sergei, both boisterous and full of youthful energy. Mikhail, a year younger than Anna, was her closest companion, sharing her love for the outdoor world. They would often venture into the birch grove together, their laughter echoing through the trees, their imaginations transforming the familiar paths into grand adventures. Sergei, a mischievous boy of 10, was the family's jester, his antics often bringing laughter even in the most arduous times. Anna loved them fiercely, her devotion to her brothers a foundational element of her understanding of familial love. Their early village life in Zariadi was defined by these simple, cyclical realities. The izba, constructed of rough-hewn logs with a steep, thatched roof, was their sanctuary, its single window peering out onto a small kitchen garden where potatoes and cabbages began to stir. The air within was always thick with the comforting aroma of wood smoke and freshly baked bread, a scent that clung to Anna's very being, a memory of warmth and belonging. Life revolved around the hearth, the communal well, and the expansive fields that stretched to the horizon, a patchwork quilt of greens and browns. The village of Zariadi itself was a cluster of perhaps 40 or 50 such izbas. Humble and unassuming, gathered around the modest wooden church with its single, weather-beaten onion dome, the church was not merely a building but the very heart of their community. Its bell marking the passage of time, its ancient icons witnessing generations of prayer and sorrow and celebration. Around it, the village green, a worn patch of earth, served as the communal gathering place, where news was exchanged, where children played, and where the communal spirit of Zariadi found its clearest expression. Anna's days were a tapestry of simple, repetitive tasks, each imbued with its own quiet significance. She would rise with the first pale light of dawn, her young body accustomed to early starts. She would help her mother knead the dough for the day's bread, her small hands learning the rhythm of the flour and water, the subtle changes in its texture. She would carry water from the communal well, the wooden buckets heavy in her hands, exchanging quiet greetings with other women. She would tend to the chickens, gathering warm, freshly laid eggs, their smooth surfaces a small miracle each morning. In the warmer months, she would work in the kitchen garden, her fingers gently coaxing new life from the soil, her heart filled with a profound sense of communion with the earth. She observed everything with a quiet, absorbing intensity, her observant nature a key aspect of her being. She noticed the subtle shifts in the light, the changing patterns of the clouds, the first tentative calls of the returning swallows. She watched her mother's hands, learning the silent language of domesticity, the unspoken wisdom of years of patient labor. She observed her father's face, reading the subtle signs of his weariness, his contentment, his occasional worries. She absorbed the quiet dramas of village life, the joy of a new birth, the sorrow of a death, the communal celebration of a wedding, the shared apprehension before a harsh winter. These were the fundamental lessons of life, learned not through words, but through diligent observation and direct experience. Her quiet strength, though yet untested by truly profound suffering, was evident even in her youth. It was seen in her unwavering patience with her younger brothers, in her tireless help with her mother's endless tasks, in her steadfast willingness to face hardship without complaint. She possessed an innate resilience, a deep, inner wellspring of quiet determination that allowed her to navigate the small challenges of her daily life with a calm dignity. This strength was not born of defiance or overt displays of will, but from a profound understanding of her place in the world, a deep connection to the enduring cycles of nature and the immutable truths of her faith. The spring, with its promise of new beginnings, also brought the annual pilgrimage to the distant market town of Bolshy Gori. This was a grand event for Anna, a rare glimpse of the world beyond Zaryadye's familiar horizons. Her father would take a cart laden with their surplus produce, cured meats, woven baskets, perhaps a few carefully preserved furs, and Anna, often with Mikhail, would accompany him. The journey itself was an adventure, the dusty road unspooling new vistas, revealing villages larger and more bustling than their own, forests stretching further than she had ever imagined. In Bolshy Gori, the sheer cacophony of the market square was overwhelming, yet exhilarating. The shouts of merchants, the smells of exotic spices and unfamiliar goods, the sight of people from other villages, even towns, dressed in finer clothes. It was a sensory explosion that left Anna both overwhelmed and quietly stimulated. She would observe everything, her keen eyes taking in the details of unfamiliar faces, the nuances of conversations, the sheer vastness of a world beyond Zaryadye. Her hopes and dreams, though still innocent and unarticulated, would subtly expand, stretching beyond the familiar confines of her village, envisioning possibilities she had never before contemplated. Perhaps, she thought, one day she would see beyond even Bolshy Gori, to the grand cities whispered about by itinerant merchants. But these were fleeting thoughts, quickly receding into the background of her deeply rooted existence. Returning to Zaryadye after such a journey was always a curious experience. The village, though small, felt like a comforting embrace, a return to the familiar. The air seemed purer, the sounds gentler, the faces more open and known. She would plunge back into her daily tasks with renewed vigor, her hands finding their rhythm with the dough, the loom, the soil, the lessons of Bolshy Gori, the glimpses of a wider world, subtly enriched her understanding of her own village, deepening her appreciation for its quiet dignity, its profound simplicity. Her love for Zaryadye was not a blind, unquestioning affection, but one born of deep intimacy and an evolving understanding of its true value. As spring turned to the full, burgeoning warmth of early summer, Anna's life continued its harmonious unfolding. The fields shimmered with the nascent green of new crops, promising a bountiful harvest. The birch grove, now in full leaf, provided a cool, dappled shade, its whispering branches inviting contemplation. Anna would still steal moments to visit her beloved grove, sitting beneath its ancient trees, listening to the gentle stir of the wind through the leaves. Here, she felt a profound connection to the enduring cycle of life, to the benevolent hand of God, to the quiet, immutable truths that governed her world. Her heart, unburdened by the complexities of the outside world, was filled with a profound sense of expectation, a quiet hope for the future. She looked forward to the next harvest, to the warmth of summer, to the small joys that each day brought. Her understanding of love and life, though still innocent, was deepening with each passing season, each observed reality. She was a young woman deeply rooted in her peasant world, profoundly connected to nature, nurtured by her family, and guided by a simple, unwavering faith. The early signs of her quiet strength and observant nature were but faint tremors of the profound resilience that lay within her, waiting to be tested by the inevitable sorrows and quiet triumphs that life, in its mysterious unfolding, would surely bring. Beneath the shadow of the birch grove, her hopes, though simple, were as vast and boundless as the clear, azure sky above Zaryadye, unaware of the subtle shifts in the wind that would soon carry whispers of change from beyond her serene horizon. Chapter 2. Summer's embrace and the weight of expectation. The spring, with its gentle, persistent unfolding, had finally yielded to the full, burgeoning warmth of summer. The fields surrounding Zariadi shimmered with a vibrant green, the promise of new life now heavy with the assurance of a bountiful harvest. The air, thick and sweet with the scent of maturing grain and wild summer flowers, hummed with the ceaseless industry of bees and the rhythmic sounds of peasant toil. For Anna Ivanovna Petrova, who had just stepped beyond the tender innocence of her 16th year, this summer held a peculiar significance, for it marked not merely the culmination of a season, but the profound, irreversible turning point of her young life, her arranged marriage. The discussions had begun weeks prior, hushed and formal, conducted between the families in the quiet hours of evening. The suitor was Dmitry Fyodorovich Volkov, from the neighboring village of Krasnoe. Dmitry was a man of 23, known for his diligence, his strong frame, and his quiet, earnest nature. His family, the Volkovs, were respected, known for their honest labor and their deep roots in the land. For Anna's parents, Ivan Denisovich and Maria Nikolaevna, it was a good match, a practical and advantageous union that would ensure their daughter's future, aligning her with a respectable household and fertile lands. Anna, accustomed to the immutable traditions of Zariadi, had accepted the news with the quiet obedience expected of a dutiful daughter. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, her young heart stirred with a complex mixture of joy and trepidation. A profound sense of stepping into the great unknown. Joy, for the prospect of her own household, her own children, her own place in the eternal tapestry of village life. She had observed the lives of other married women, their quiet authority within their homes, the deep satisfaction that seemed to emanate from their tireless nurturing. She imagined a home filled with the warmth of a hearthfire, the scent of fresh bread, the sound of children's laughter. This was the natural path, the fulfillment of a woman's destiny as ordained by God and tradition. And Dmitry, though a man of few words, possessed kind eyes and a steady gaze that promised a quiet companionship, a reliable presence in her future, but also trepidation, a profound, almost spiritual fear of the unknown. She was leaving Zariadi, the only world she had ever known, the comforting embrace of her family, her beloved birch grove that had been her sanctuary since childhood. She was exchanging the known rhythms of her parents' izba for the unfamiliar customs of another household, another family. Would she meet the expectations placed upon her? Would she be a good wife, a capable mistress of her own home, a fertile mother? These questions, unspoken and profound, weighed heavily upon her young heart, a subtle shadow beneath the summer's embrace. The wedding itself was a traditional village affair, steeped in ancient rituals and communal celebration. The entire village of Zariadi gathered, their faces shining with warmth and well-wishing. The solemnity of the ceremony in the small wooden church, presided over by the venerable Father Sergei, was followed by a boisterous feast in the village green, filled with food, kvass, and traditional songs. Anna moved through it all as if in a dream, her hand in Dmitry's, her heart aflutter with a mixture of reverence and quiet awe. She felt the eyes of her parents, her brothers, her neighbors, on her, their unspoken blessings, their hopes for her future. She was no longer simply Anna Ivanovna Petrova, she was Anna Ivanovna Volkov. A wife, a new branch grafted onto an ancient tree, embarking on a life of profound expectations. The move to Krasnoe was a quiet, bittersweet transition. Dmitry's izba was modest, similar to her parents' own, but it was theirs. It smelled of fresh pine and newly swept earth, a blank canvas awaiting the warmth of her presence. Dmitry's father, Ivan Petrovich, a man of stern countenance but quiet dignity, observed her with discerning eyes. She sensed his assessment, his unspoken expectations for a capable, hard-working daughter-in-law. Dmitry's mother had passed many years ago, leaving Ivan Petrovich a widower, a fact that both saddened Anna and imbued her with a sense of immense responsibility to fill the void, to bring warmth back to their home. The expectations placed upon a young wife in the village were clear, immutable, and deeply ingrained. She was to be diligent, hard-working, and devoted. Her hands were to be perpetually busy, tending the hearth, preparing the food, mending the clothes, tending the garden, caring for the livestock. She was to be frugal, resourceful, ensuring the household ran smoothly and efficiently. She was to be respectful of her father-in-law, obedient to her husband, and a tireless nurturer of her future children. These were not mere suggestions. but the very pillars upon which a peasant woman's life was built. The sacred duties that ensured the continuity of family and community. Anna embraced these expectations with a quiet determination, drawing on the lessons learned from her mother. Her spirit imbued with the unspoken strength of generations of peasant women who had fulfilled these very roles. Dmitri, true to his quiet nature, was a man of few words, but his devotion was palpable in his actions. He was kind, patient, and immensely hardworking. He treated her with gentle respect, sharing the burdens of labor, consulting her on household matters, and ensuring her comfort. Their love, born not of passionate words but of shared purpose and quiet understanding, deepened with each passing day, like a slow, steady river carving its path through the landscape. In the evenings, as they sat by the hearth, the silence between them was not empty, but filled with a comfortable intimacy, a profound sense of shared life. The greatest of these expectations, and the most profoundly desired, was the expectation of children. A peasant family's prosperity, its very future, hinged upon the blessing of progeny. For Anna, the prospect of motherhood was a sacred calling, a fulfillment of her deepest hopes. She yearned for the warmth of a child in her arms, the sight of a new life unfolding within her home. She prayed fervently before the icon in their izba, supplicating the Mother of God for this precious gift. The spring following her marriage, her body began to change, subtly at first, then with an undeniable certainty. A profound sense of awe, mingled with a quiet trepidation, filled her. She was carrying new life, a miracle unfolding within her. She confided in Maria Nikolaevna, her mother, whose eyes, filled with understanding and tender affection, confirmed her hopeful suspicions. The news was met with quiet joy in the Volkov household, a sense of profound gratitude to God. Ivan Petrovich, though outwardly stoic, offered a rare, approving nod, his eyes gleaming with a quiet satisfaction. The long, hot summer days of her pregnancy were filled with a curious mixture of heightened awareness and continued toil. She worked tirelessly, diligently, carrying her burden with grace, her movements perhaps a little slower, a little more deliberate, but never ceasing. She felt the subtle stirrings within her, the undeniable presence of the life growing beneath her heart, and her connection to the ancient, cyclical rhythms of nature deepened profoundly. She felt as though she were a part of the earth itself, nurturing a precious seed within her, awaiting its inevitable blooming, as the leaves on the birch trees began their subtle shift towards autumn gold, signaling the impending end of summer. The birth of her first child drew near. The labor was long and arduous, a primal struggle that transcended all previous experiences. Anna was attended by her mother, Maria Nikolaevna, and by the village midwife, old Aksenya, whose hands were gnarled but infinitely gentle. The small izba, usually a place of quiet comfort, was filled with the sounds of her strained breathing, her cries, and the murmured reassurances of the women. Dmitri waited outside, pacing nervously in the yard, his stoic composure momentarily shattered by the profound vulnerability of his beloved Anna, by the terrifying mystery of childbirth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a new sound pierced the night, the thin, vigorous cry of a newborn. A profound wave of exhaustion, mingled with an overwhelming surge of relief and joy, washed over Anna. A son. They laid him on her breast. A tiny, warm bundle, his small face red and wrinkled, his tiny hands grasping instinctively. He was perfect. He was theirs. He was life. Fyodor, Dmitri whispered, his voice thick with emotion, as he stood over her, his face etched with wonder and profound gratitude. Fyodor Dmitrich Volkov. The name resonated in the small izba, carrying the weight of generations, of a future now secured. The days that followed were a period of immense, unparalleled joy. The immediate joys of motherhood consumed Anna entirely. She spent her days nurturing Fyodor, feeding him, rocking him, marveling at his tiny fingers, his soft sighs, his profound innocence. Her heart swelled with an overflowing love, a love so vast it encompassed her entire being. She saw in his small face the continuation of her own life, of Dmitri's, of the Volkov and Petrova lineages, a tangible manifestation of her deepest hopes. She felt a profound connection to all mothers, to all women who had cradled new life, to the ancient, sacred purpose of creation. The village rejoiced quietly with them. Women brought small gifts, offered blessings, and shared their own experiences of motherhood. A communal embrace of the new life. Ivan Petrovich would stand by the cradle, his stern features softened by a faint smile, his ancient eyes filled with a quiet satisfaction. He would offer a gruff, yet tender, word of blessing over his grandson, a patriarch acknowledging the continuity of his line. Yet, alongside these profound joys, Anna also began to discover the immediate challenges of motherhood, especially in the demanding realities of peasant life. The days, already filled with ceaseless labor, now stretched longer, punctuated by the infant's cries, by the relentless demands of feeding and comforting. Sleep became a precious, elusive luxury. Her body, weary from childbirth, ached with a new kind of exhaustion. She learned to steal moments of rest whenever Fyodor slept, to nurse him even as she kneaded dough or spun wool. Her strength, already quiet and enduring, was now tested in new ways, stretched to its very limits by the demands of ceaseless nurturing and unending toil. She discovered the overwhelming responsibility that came with this boundless love. Every cry of Fyodor, every slight fever, every moment of discomfort, pierced her heart with a sharp anxiety. She learned to read his subtle cues, to understand his unspoken needs, to protect his fragile, precious life from the myriad unseen dangers of the world. Her innate observant nature, once a tool for understanding nature's rhythms, now turned inwards, meticulously studying the nuances of her child's being. In the quiet hours of the night, as Fyodor slept fitfully beside her, Anna would lie awake, listening to his soft breathing, feeling the profound weight of her new reality. The immense love she felt was inextricably intertwined with a newfound vulnerability, a profound awareness of the fragility of life. She prayed with a new fervor, her supplications for her son's health and protection deeper, more desperate than any prayers she had offered before. She was no longer just Anna Ivanovna Petrova, the young girl of Zariadi. She was Mama, a protector, a nurturer, a vessel of life, bearing the profound weight of expectation, cradling the promise of spring in her arms, utterly immersed in summer's embrace, her quiet strength subtly growing with each challenge, each joy, each sleepless night. The rhythm of her life had shifted, irrevocably bound now to the tiny, beating heart of her first child. Chapter 3. The first fading, loss amidst abundance. The summer, which had so recently enveloped Anna Ivanovna Volkov in the boundless joy of new motherhood, now shimmered with an almost unbearable intensity, its days long and heavy with the promise of a bountiful harvest. Young Fyodor, her precious son, thrived under her tireless devotion, his small body a testament to the miracle of life, his soft cries a constant, comforting rhythm in their izba. Anna's heart, though weary from the ceaseless demands of nurturing, overflowed with a profound gratitude, a serene contentment that seemed to settle upon her like the warm summer dust. She moved through her days with a quiet purpose, her hands perpetually busy, her spirit profoundly engaged with the tangible realities of her small, beloved world. Yet, even in the heart of this seemingly boundless abundance, amidst the vibrant hum of life in Zariadi and Krasnoe, the threads of sorrow, subtle and unseen, began to weave themselves into the intricate tapestry of Anna's existence. For in the grand design of the world, joy and grief, like spring and winter, were inextricably bound, and even the most vibrant bloom must, in time, experience its fading. It was a truth understood implicitly by the peasants of Russia, woven into their very being by generations of hardship and unwavering faith. The first hint of this impending shadow arrived not with a sudden, dramatic flourish, but with a subtle, insidious disquiet that permeated the humid summer air. Old Grisha, the village elder whose eyes missed little, spoke in hushed tones by the well of a fever, a burning sickness, that had taken root in a distant hamlet, brought by a passing merchant. The news, though initially vague, carried a chilling familiarity. Such fevers were not unknown, especially in the sweltering heat of late summer when the air hung heavy and still. They were a reminder of life's precariousness, of the unseen forces that could, with terrifying swiftness, snatch away even the most precious of blessings. Anna, with her heightened maternal awareness, felt a tremor of apprehension. She watched Fyodor with a new vigilance, noting every cough, every slight flush of his tender skin. Her days, though still filled with joy, were now subtly underscored by a pervasive anxiety. She continued her tasks, her hands kneading dough, her fingers tending the small kitchen garden, but her mind remained attuned to the delicate balance of her son's well-being. She prayed with a newfound fervor before the icon in their izba. Her supplications for Fyodor's health more desperate, more visceral, than any she had uttered before. The sickness, however, moved with an unseen speed, a relentless, unpitying current. It passed through the neighboring villages, leaving behind a trail of grief. And then, one sweltering afternoon, it arrived in Krasnoe. A young child, Mikhail Fyodorovich, the son of their neighbor, began to burn with a fever, his small body racked by an invisible torment. The village midwife, old Aksenya, worked tirelessly, but the sickness defied all remedies, all traditional cures. Within days, Mikhail Fyodorovich was gone, his small light extinguished as swiftly as a candle in a sudden gust of wind. The village's communal grief was profound, a shared lament that echoed through the izbas. Neighbors gathered, offering what little comfort they could, their faces etched with sorrow and a chilling, shared dread. This was a tragedy that touched every heart, a grim reminder of their shared vulnerability in the face of unseen forces. Anna participated in the communal rituals, her heart heavy with sympathy for the grieving parents, with unspoken prayers for the departed soul. But beneath the communal sorrow, a deeper, more personal terror began to bloom within her, a cold, insidious dread that wrapped itself around her own precious son. Fyodor, her little son, had seemed strong, thriving, but one sweltering evening, as the air hung heavy and still, Anna felt a sudden, alarming heat emanating from his small body. His breathing grew shallow, his cries weak and fitful. The fever had claimed him. A cold, paralyzing fear seized Anna. She clutched him to her breast, rocking him gently, murmuring prayers, desperate entreaties to the Holy Mother, to God, to spare her child, to avert this unspeakable calamity. Dmitri, his face etched with a profound despair he rarely showed, brought cold compresses, his large, calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he tried to cool Fyodor's burning skin. Ivan Petrovich, his stern features softened by a grim sorrow, sat silently by the hearth, his gaze fixed on the struggling child, his ancient wisdom offering no solace, only the quiet resignation of a man who had seen too much suffering. Old Aksenya, the midwife, came and went, her remedies futile against the sickness that seemed to consume the child from within. The days that followed were a torment of ceaseless vigil. Anna did not sleep, did not eat, her entire being consumed by the desperate, futile struggle against the invisible foe. She watched the light slowly fade from Fyodor's eyes, saw the small, weak tremors that racked his body. Her prayers became desperate pleas, then anguished cries, then silent, heartbroken entreaties to a God who seemed distant, indifferent, utterly silent in the face of her profound agony. She pleaded for a miracle, for a sign, for any flicker of hope, but the silence of the heavens was absolute. And then, one sweltering evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a bruised, melancholy purple, Fyodor's small body grew still. His breathing ceased, his tiny hand, so recently grasping her finger with surprising strength, went limp. He was gone. A silent, piercing cry tore through Anna's soul, a sound far more profound than any wail. She clutched his small, lifeless form to her breast, rocking him gently, murmuring his name, as if her love, her desperate will, could somehow coax life back into him. The world seemed to collapse around her, its vibrant colors draining into a monochrome of grief, its joyful hum replaced by a deafening silence. The abundance of summer, the promise of the harvest, seemed a cruel mockery against the profound emptiness in her arms. Dmitri, his face a mask of unspeakable grief, gently took the child from her arms, his own body shaking with suppressed sobs. Ivan Petrovich, his ancient eyes filled with a profound sorrow, helped prepare the small body for burial, performing the rituals with a quiet, sorrowful dignity. The village came, their faces etched with sympathy, their voices hushed with communal grief. They offered their condolences, their quiet comfort, their shared lament, but for Anna, their words were a distant, meaningless hum. She moved through the funeral rituals as if in a dream, her body functioning mechanically, her mind utterly consumed by a profound, agonizing void. Her private struggle with profound questions of fate and divine will consumed her. She had always believed in a benevolent God, in a divine plan that, however mysterious, was ultimately just and merciful. But what justice could be found in this? In the senseless death of an innocent child? A pure, unblemished soul? Why had God, who had granted her this precious life, so cruelly snatched it away? Her prayers, once a source of comfort and certainty, now felt like echoes in a vast, empty void, utterly unanswered, profoundly betrayed. The gentle teachings of her youth, of God's omnipresent love, shattered in the face of such overwhelming, personal agony. She looked at the birch grove, its leaves still vibrant green, mocking her grief with their boundless vitality, and questioned the very order of creation. The days that followed Fyodor's burial were cloaked in a profound, pervasive melancholia. The joyous rhythms of summer, once so vital, now felt discordant, out of sync with the relentless grief that consumed her. She performed her daily tasks, kneading dough, drawing water, tending to the hens, but her movements were slow, her mind distant. The scent of wood smoke, once comforting, now felt stale, suffocating. The silence in the izba, where Fyodor's cries once echoed, was deafening, a constant reminder of his absence. Her deepening connection to her immediate family, however, became a fragile, yet vital, anchor in her overwhelming grief. Dmitri, though consumed by his own profound sorrow, remained her steadfast presence. He sat with her in the evenings, his large, calloused hand holding hers, offering not words, for words were useless, but a shared silence, a quiet communion of grief. He would walk with her to Fyodor's small grave by the church, standing beside her in silent vigil, his strength a tangible comfort against the immensity of her despair. He brought her small offerings from the fields, the first tender shoots of spring, simple acts of love that spoke volumes. Ivan Petrovich, with his ancient wisdom and stern, yet loving, nature, offered a different kind of solace. He spoke little of the grief itself, for grief was a private journey, but he spoke of endurance, of the unyielding cycles of life and death, of the necessity of accepting God's inscrutable will. However painful, the earth takes, Anna, he rumbled, his voice rough but kind, as it gives, it is the eternal truth. We plant seeds, and some grow strong, and some wither too soon. But the earth endures, and so must we, for the sake of those who remain. His words, steeped in the grim acceptance of peasant life, offered a framework for enduring the unbearable, a path towards quiet resignation. Her mother, Maria Nikolaevna, traveled from Zariadi often, her own face etched with sorrow. For Fyodor was her grandson, a piece of her own heart. She would sit with Anna, holding her hand, murmuring ancient lullabies, the songs of comfort that had cradled generations. She brought practical help, kneading dough, mending clothes, quiet acts of love that reminded Anna of the enduring bonds of kinship. She urged Anna to eat, to rest, to live for the living. For Dmitri, for the life that still remained within their izba. Anna found herself clinging to these threads of connection, to the silent strength of Dmitri, to the quiet wisdom of Ivan Petrovich, to the gentle comfort of her mother. They were her lifeline in the vast, turbulent ocean of her grief. She observed their enduring strength, their capacity for resilience, and a flicker of something akin to hope began to stir within her. A desperate yearning to find her own way back from the abyss. The summer waned, its vibrant colors slowly fading, replaced by the richer, more melancholic hues of autumn. The harvest was gathered, its abundance a stark contrast to the emptiness in Anna's heart. She performed her tasks, tirelessly, relentlessly, finding a perverse comfort in the sheer physical exhaustion, a temporary respite from her tormented mind. She immersed herself in the ritualistic preparations for winter, ensuring the household was stocked, the clothes mended, the hearth perpetually warm. These acts of continuity, of nurturing life despite profound loss, became her own form of silent prayer, a stubborn assertion of life against the pervasive presence of death. Her resilience, forged in the quiet fire of her grief, began to manifest itself in subtle ways. She still carried the weight of her sorrow, the indelible scar of Fyodor's absence, but she began to find strength in her quiet endurance, In her unwavering commitment to her duties as a wife, as a daughter-in-law, as a woman of the village, she recognized that true strength was not the absence of pain, but the capacity to live with it, to carry it, and still continue to nurture life, to find meaning in the everyday. Her faith, though forever changed, transformed from a simple, unquestioning belief into a deeper, more profound conviction, one born not of innocence, but of the crucible of suffering and the tenacious endurance of the human spirit. She still sought answers to her questions about God, but now, she sought them not in grand pronouncements, but in the quiet strength of her own heart, in the enduring love of her family, and in the relentless, unwavering rhythm of the seasons. The first fading had occurred, but in its wake, a deeper, more profound understanding of life's complexities was slowly, painfully, taking root, beneath the shadow of the birch grove. Chapter 4. The unspoken burden of the harvest. Years, like countless grains of wheat sown and reaped, had flowed over the village of Krasnoe since the quiet agony of young Fyodor's passing. The profound sorrow, once a raw and open wound in Anna Ivanovna Volkov's heart, had, through the relentless turning of the seasons and the ceaseless demands of peasant life, slowly, arduously, transformed into a deep, indelible scar, a silent testament to enduring pain but also to enduring strength. The tender shoots of spring had given way to the full, burgeoning heat of summer, and then to the bountiful, yet demanding, promise of autumn, again and again, marking the passage of more than a decade since that first agonizing grief. Anna was no longer the young, newlywed woman of 18, trembling on the threshold of motherhood. She was now a mature woman, nearing her mid-30s, her face etched with lines that spoke not of age, but of tireless effort, of countless suns and winters endured, of the unspoken burdens quietly borne. Her movements, once imbued with the tentative grace of youth, now possessed the quiet authority and fluid efficiency of a woman whose life had been a perpetual dance with the earth. Her life had been blessed by the relentless cycle of creation, and she was now a mother to several children, each a precious gift, a reaffirmation of life's tenacious spirit. After the profound grief of losing Fyodor, God, in his inscrutable mercy, had granted her 3 more lives to nurture, to protect, to guide. Ivan, a strong, quiet boy now verging on 12, who often mirrored his father and grandfather in his stoicism and his deep connection to the land. Maria, a spirited girl of 10, whose quick wit and bright eyes often reminded Anna of her own innocent youth. A vibrant spark of defiance in the quiet household, and little Alexei, still a boisterous toddler of 3, whose boundless energy and infectious laughter filled the izba with ceaseless joy. A constant, tangible reminder of life's enduring miracle. Their presence was a continuous, palpable reaffirmation of life over death, of hope over sorrow. A constant wellspring of purpose for Anna. She loved them fiercely, her devotion a boundless wellspring, pouring herself into their care with a quiet intensity that knew no bounds, observing their subtle developments with a discerning eye. Yet, even with this abundance of life, this outward fulfillment of her duties, Anna found herself bearing burdens that, though often unseen and unspoken, weighed heavily upon her heart, shaping her character in ways that only a profound observer might discern. The most immediate, and perhaps most pervasive, of these was the relentless labor of the harvest season. Year after year, it was a time of immense, almost brutal, physical exertion, of days that stretched from before the first pale hint of dawn until long after dusk had fully descended. When the body ached with a deep, pervasive weariness that sleep could barely assuage, the summer sun beat down with merciless intensity, baking the vast fields, drawing sweat from every pore, leaving the skin parched and cracked. The air was thick with dust and the chaff of grain, clinging to her clothes, coating her throat, stinging her eyes. Anna would rise with the first pale light, her hands already anticipating the unending tasks, preparing vast quantities of food for the laborers who gathered to help, carrying fresh water to the parched fields, binding sheaves of rye until her fingers ached and bled, endlessly raking the cut hay into fragrant piles, her back perpetually bent in rhythmic motion. The sheer physical toll was immense, a constant gnawing exhaustion that permeated her very being. She worked alongside Dmitri, his presence a quiet, enduring comfort, though he too had changed profoundly since his return from the war. The conflict had left its indelible mark upon him, a profound solemnity that clung to him like a second skin, casting a subtle shadow over his gaze. He worked with a tireless diligence that sometimes bordered on the feverish. His mind often distant, consumed by unspoken echoes from the battlefield that Anna sensed but could not fully grasp. He was a good husband, kind and unwavering in his devotion, his hands always ready to help with the heaviest tasks. But the effortless, spontaneous communion they had once shared in their youth had deepened into a more complex. Often silent, understanding, he was steadfast, yes, but his steadfastness was now a resilience born of internal struggle, a grim acceptance of life's complexities. And while it brought him a profound peace, it sometimes left a subtle, unspoken distance between them, a barrier that Anna, despite her yearning, could not entirely breach. Anna observed this change, accepting it with the quiet patience that characterized her nature, knowing with an innate wisdom that some burdens, even between the most devoted of souls, must ultimately be borne alone, in the quiet confines of one's own heart. Another, more pervasive, burden was the subtle, unspoken domestic tensions that permeated their household, particularly emanating from Ivan Petrovich's unmarried sister, Varvara Petrovna. After the death of Dmitri's mother many years ago, Varvara Petrovna, a woman older than Anna, with a sharp tongue and an unyielding adherence to strict, often antiquated, custom, had taken on the role of mistress of the izba. While she had ostensibly welcomed Anna into the household, her welcome had been tinged with a constant, critical eye, perpetually scrutinizing Anna's every move, her every task, her every decision. Her praises were rare and grudging, delivered with a faint air of concession, while her criticisms were frequent and cutting, delivered with a subtle, yet profound, disdain for Anna's Zaryadi village ways, for her quieter nature, for anything that deviated from Varvara's own rigid standards. "The bread is too soft today, Anna," Varvara would comment, her voice flat, devoid of warmth, her eyes narrowed with disapproval. Even when the loaves were perfectly baked, golden and fragrant, fit for any table, my sister, God rest her soul, always made a crust fit for the Tsar himself. "You must use more salt. Or perhaps knead it with more force. Or, the children are too boisterous. Anna, a well-run house is a quiet house, reflecting order and discipline." Such remarks, seemingly minor, accumulated like countless tiny, sharp stones, each one landing silently but adding to the weight on Anna's spirit, threatening to chip away at her quiet contentment, at her hard-won sense of self-worth. Anna would listen in silence, her gaze fixed on her work, her face revealing nothing of the hurt that tightened her chest, her hands continuing their rhythmic tasks without falter. She never spoke back, for to do so would be disrespectful, a breach of custom that would bring shame upon her household and disrupt the fragile domestic peace. Her quiet strength was not a defiant fire, but a deep, enduring well of patience that absorbed the slights without yielding, without breaking. Varvara, sensing Anna's unspoken acquiescence, often pushed further, her expectations bordering on the unreasonable, her demands growing with the seasons. She demanded meticulous cleanliness, even in the dustiest days of harvest when the very air was thick with grime. She criticized Anna's weaving, her mending, her methods of preserving the harvest, all subtly undermining Anna's quiet authority in her own home, sowing seeds of doubt in the minds of others. Dmitri, though loving and protective, often remained oblivious to these subtle tensions, immersed as he was in his own inner world of memory and the demanding labor of the fields. Or perhaps he simply chose not to see, for to intervene would be to disrupt the fragile peace of his home. A peace he clung to fiercely after the terrors of war, a peace he was desperate to preserve above all else. Anna accepted this, too, as part of her burden, understanding with a profound intuition that men, even the most devoted, sometimes failed to perceive the quiet, internal battles waged within the walls of their own homes, within the hearts of their women. Anna's personal sacrifices were numerous, often unspoken, and deeply profound, known only to her own heart. Her body, though robust and enduring, endured the relentless demands of childbearing, of sleepless nights spent tending to sick infants or frightened children, of ceaseless, back-breaking labor that left her perpetually weary. The physical toll was immense, leaving her muscles aching, Her hands gnarled, her strength constantly tested, yet she bore it without complaint. For this was the peasant woman's lot, her sacred duty, her path to fulfillment. Her own youthful dreams, once stretching beyond the horizons of Zariati, had long since narrowed, subsumed by the immediate, pressing realities of her daily life, by the overwhelming demands of her family, by the endless cycle of nurturing. She had once cherished moments of solitude in the birch grove, finding solace in its quiet embrace, its dappled light, but now, such moments were rare, snatched glimpses of a past peace, a luxury she could no longer afford. She would often sit by the hearth in the evenings, after the children were asleep and Varvara had retired to her own corner. Her hands perpetually busy with mending or spinning, her movements fluid and practiced even in exhaustion. Her eyes, though weary, would trace the patterns of the flickering firelight, her mind drifting to her own mother, Maria Nikolaevna, remembering her quiet strength, her unyielding devotion, her endless capacity for silent sacrifice. She understood now, with a deeper, more profound clarity, the unspoken sorrows her mother must have carried, the myriad sacrifices made in silence, the quiet triumphs achieved not through grand gestures, but through tireless love, unwavering faith, and steadfast endurance. A quiet understanding of her own place in this long lineage settled upon her. The children, though a boundless source of joy, also brought their own unique burdens, their own individual demands. Ivan, her eldest, was often quiet, mirroring Dmitri in his contemplative nature, but sometimes displayed a stubbornness that challenged Anna's boundless patience, requiring firm yet gentle guidance. Maria, spirited and inquisitive, demanded constant attention, her boundless energy and quick questions a delightful, yet exhausting, presence. Little Alexei, still too young to fully understand the complexities of life, brought joy with his innocent laughter, his boundless curiosity, but also the ceaseless demands of infancy, the endless cycles of feeding and comforting, of soothing and nurturing. Anna poured herself into them, nurturing their small bodies, guiding their burgeoning spirits, recognizing in their growth the true harvest of her life, the most profound meaning of her existence, a purpose that transcended all personal discomforts. The unspoken burden of the harvest, Anna understood, was not merely physical labor, it was a spiritual and emotional one. It was the constant vigilance against disease, against crop failure, against the ever-present threat of hunger that lurked at the edges of their existence. It was the relentless anxiety for her children's well-being, the quiet prayers offered for their health and safety, for their future. It was the unwavering commitment to her husband, to her father-in-law, to the complex and often demanding dynamics of her household. And it was the acceptance of Varvara's constant scrutiny, her ceaseless criticism, absorbing the barbs without allowing them to penetrate to the very core of her spirit. Finding strength in her own internal resilience, Anna found her solace not in spoken words, for words often failed to convey the depths of her quiet strength, but in the rhythm of her work, in the tangible results of her labor, in the steady, familiar movements of her hands. She found it in the sight of her children's healthy faces, in the warmth of Dmitri's quiet presence beside her in the evenings, in the small, almost imperceptible moments of grace that dotted her demanding days, the smell of freshly baked bread, the feel of clean linen against her skin, the sight of a well-tended garden yielding its bounty. These were her quiet triumphs. Daily affirmations of her enduring spirit, her unwavering devotion to her home, her family, her very purpose, her faith, which had been so profoundly tested by the loss of Fyodor, continued to deepen, transforming from a simple adherence to dogma into a profound, personal conviction, a vibrant, living truth within her. She no longer sought answers in grand pronouncements or abstract theological debates, but in the quiet, ceaseless cycle of life, in the resilient spirit of the earth, in the enduring capacity for love and endurance she witnessed all around her. God was not a distant, all-powerful figure who dictated fates from on high, but a pervasive presence found in the most humble acts of creation, in the quiet strength of perseverance, in the unwavering love that bound her family together, in the very breath of life itself. She carried her sorrows in silence, for they were too deeply personal to articulate, too profound for spoken words, but her quiet triumphs resonated through the very fabric of her being. a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. As the summer waned, and the first golden hues of autumn began to paint the leaves of the birch grove, Anna stood in her fields, her hands calloused, her back aching, her spirit weary but unbroken. The harvested rye lay in golden sheaves, a testament to countless hours of tireless toil, a promise of sustenance for the cold months ahead. She looked at her children, playing quietly nearby, their faces illuminated by the setting sun, their laughter a sweet, enduring melody. She thought of Dmitri, working diligently beside her, his presence a quiet, enduring comfort, a silent promise of steadfastness. She thought of Varvara, her sharp words, her unspoken resentments, and felt a quiet, compassionate acceptance. And she thought of the enduring wisdom of the land, which demanded relentless effort and unwavering patience, but always offered a harvest in return. Her life, measured by the seasons, by the ceaseless cycle of sowing and reaping, was a tapestry woven from threads of unspoken sorrows and quiet triumphs. A profound testament to the enduring strength of a village woman's heart. Beneath the shadow of the birch grove, she knew that her burdens, though heavy, were part of the very essence of her existence, and in bearing them, she found her deepest meaning. Chapter 5. The chill of absence, the war's distant echo. The enduring summer had drawn to its close, leaving behind the rich, golden memory of a bountiful harvest. The air in Krasnoe, once thick with the buzzing of bees and the shouts of laborers, now carried the crisp, melancholic scent of damp, decaying leaves, heralding the inevitable onset of autumn. For Anna Ivanovna Volkov, these were years of quiet toil and steadfast nurturing, her life measured by the steady rhythm of the seasons, by the growth of her children, Ivan, Maria, and little Alexei, and by the subtle, unspoken currents of domestic harmony and familial tensions within her izba. The unspoken burdens, particularly the pervasive presence of Varvara Petrovna and the quiet distance that sometimes enveloped Dmitri, had woven themselves into the fabric of her mature existence, accepted with the profound patience that characterized her spirit. Yet, even in this self-contained world of familiar rhythms and known struggles, the vast, indifferent currents of the outside world, distant and abstract no longer, began to stir, carrying with them the chill of absence, the war's distant echo. The first faint murmurs arrived not as a sudden, clamorous pronouncement, but as a subtle dissonance in the quiet symphony of village life. They were carried by itinerant merchants whose faces seemed unusually drawn, by seasonal laborers returning early from distant towns, their usual boisterousness replaced by a grim, unspoken apprehension. The whispers, barely audible at first, spoke of unrest in the south, of tensions with the Turks, of the Tsar's great needs. Such talk, often dismissed as the mere grumbling of distant powers, began to take on a new, unsettling resonance. The old men by the communal well, whose memories stretched back to forgotten conflicts, would nod grimly, their gazes fixed on the horizon as if discerning an approaching storm invisible to younger eyes. Anna, with her acutely observant nature, absorbed these faint tremors. She noticed the way conversations hushed when a stranger passed, the nervous glances exchanged among the men, the increased fervor in Father Sergei's Sunday sermons, which began to speak of righteous causes and the defense of Holy Russia. Her initial detachment, born of years spent tending to the immediate realities of her farm and family, began to fray. The echoes, faint at first, grew steadily louder, insinuating themselves into the very fabric of Krasnoe's tranquil existence. Then came the more concrete news, a brutal articulation of the vague whispers. A young man from a neighboring village, Ivan Yakovlev, returned from the district town of Bolshy Lippy, his face pale, his eyes wide with a terror that transcended exhaustion. He spoke of official decrees posted in the town square, of demands for new levies, of mobilization orders being distributed throughout the gubernia. The words, though bureaucratic and cold, struck at the very heart of Krasnoe, threatening to pluck its sons from their fields, their homes, their very lives. The village, which had already seen the profound sorrow of the earlier conscription that had taken Frol, Grigory, Ilya, and Pyotr, now braced itself for another, potentially more devastating, blow. The discussions among the villagers grew desperate, filled with grim speculation. Which families would be hit? How many more would be taken? The war was no longer a distant thunder, it was a storm gathering directly overhead. Its chilling breath felt in every household. Anna listened, her heart a heavy weight in her chest. She saw the despair in the eyes of mothers with young sons. The quiet apprehension of wives. The shared burden of a community bracing for another profound sacrifice. She remembered the anguished cries of Grigory's wife, Elena, and the profound, silent sorrow of Ilya, the widower. The human cost of imperial decisions, distant and abstract when announced in Tsar's decrees, was terrifyingly real when it manifested in the broken hearts and empty homes of her neighbors. Anna observed these sufferings with an innate, profound empathy, understanding them not with her intellect, but with the raw, intuitive wisdom of her own life, of her own enduring sorrows. The communal mood in Krasnoe grew heavier with each passing day. The sounds of laughter became rarer, replaced by hushed conversations and the persistent hum of anxiety. The men in the fields worked with a new, grim determination, as if by working harder, by extracting every last grain from the reluctant earth, they could somehow stave off the inevitable. The women gathered by the well, their usual cheerful chatter replaced by anxious whispers about their sons, their husbands, their brothers. They shared old folk remedies, whispered ancient charms, desperate attempts to ward off the encroaching darkness, to bend an unyielding fate. Then came the dreaded official visit. Not a mere courier, but a stern, unsmiling district official, accompanied by armed Cossacks, riding into Krasnoe with a grim formality that left no room for doubt. He gathered the village elders, the starosta, and Father Sergei in the communal hall. The air in the room was thick with unspoken fear, the very walls seeming to absorb the palpable dread. Anna, along with other village women, waited outside, their hands clasped, their eyes fixed on the closed door, their breaths held collectively. When the men emerged, their faces were ashen, etched with profound sorrow. The starosta, Stepan Mikhailovich, his shoulders slumped, his voice barely a whisper, delivered the devastating news. The levy was indeed high. Not just a few men, but a significant number, more than the village had contributed in a generation. And this time, it would reach deeper into the families, claiming men who had wives, who had young children, men who were pillars of their households. The chilling weight of the decree settled upon them, a cold hand reaching into every home. Anna felt a cold dread seize her. She thought of Dmitri, his enduring strength, his quiet resolve. She thought of their sons. Ivan, now nearing 12, was strong and diligent, rapidly growing into a man. Maria, though a girl, possessed a spirit as bright and unyielding as any man's. And little Alexei, so full of innocent laughter, whose future was still a blank page. The war was no longer a distant echo, it was a looming shadow, threatening to envelop her own precious children, to snatch them away just as it had snatched Fyodor from her arms so many years ago. Her quiet fear for her own sons as they grow older began to manifest itself as a persistent, gnawing anxiety. She would watch Ivan in the fields, his young body already strong from work, and a profound sadness would wash over her, a premonition of the future. He was approaching the age of eligibility, the age when the Tsar's demands would become a very real threat. She would hold Alexei close, burying her face in his soft, innocent hair, inhaling his sweet scent, her heart aching with the terrifying knowledge that his boundless joy could be extinguished by a distant, impersonal decree. She had brought life into the world, nurtured it with boundless love, only for it to be potentially claimed by a force she could neither understand nor resist. The days leading up to the conscription drawing were agonizing. The whole village was in a state of suspended animation, every family with eligible men living under the palpable weight of impending fate. Anna observed the transformations around her. The young men, usually full of youthful bravado, now moved with a quiet resignation, their faces pale. The mothers wept openly, their cries echoing through the village like a mournful wind. The silence of the men, deeper and more profound than usual, spoke volumes of their silent dread, their suppressed fears. On the morning of the drawing, the air was heavy, still, as if the very elements held their breath. The entire village gathered on the green, under a sky that seemed to weep silently, its gray expanse mirroring the sorrow below. The district official, stern and impassive, presided over the grim ceremony. Father Sergei stood beside him, his face etched with profound grief, his voice trembling as he offered prayers for the departing, for the grieving, for Russia. One by one, the names were called. Each name was a fresh wound, a tearing of the delicate fabric of communal life. Anna watched, her own heart a raw knot of dread. She saw neighbor after neighbor fall to their knees, their faces contorted in silent agony. She saw mothers wail, wives collapse, children cling to their fathers with desperate, uncomprehending strength. The process was brutal in its arbitrary fairness, hitting families indiscriminately, scattering seeds of sorrow across the village. Her cousin, Fyodor Petrovich, a man with a young wife and 2 small children, was called. Anna saw his wife, Katerina, stumble, her cry a thin, piercing sound. Then, young Vasily Mikhailovich, a boy barely 18, his mother collapsing into the arms of a neighbor. The list grew, each name a testament to the war's relentless hunger. Then, a name that struck Anna with a chilling immediacy, Mikhail Ivanovich Petrova. Her own brother, Mikhail, her closest companion from childhood, the one who had explored the birch grove with her, whose laughter had filled their youth. He was now a strong, vital man in his late 20s, a husband, a father to 2 young daughters. A collective gasp rippled through the part of the crowd where her family stood. Her mother, Maria Nikolaevna, let out a choked cry, her face crumbling in despair. Ivan Denisovich, Anna's father, stood rigidly, his face a mask of profound grief, his gaze fixed on his son, unable to move. Anna felt a profound, almost paralyzing surge of sorrow. It was her own blood, her own family, now directly touched by the brutal hand of war. She met Mikhail's eyes across the crowd, and in his gaze, she saw a profound fear, a silent plea. Her heart ached for him, for his young wife, for his innocent daughters. She saw the silent, tearful exchange between her parents, the unspoken agony of a son being torn from them. The drawing continued, claiming other men from Krasnoe. The number was vast, devastating. The village would be left with a profound emptiness, its fields tended by the very old, the very young, and the women. The communal sorrow deepened, a tangible weight on their shoulders, a shared burden that transcended individual grief. As the men chosen that day began to prepare for their departure, the village rallied around them with a grim determination. Women gathered to mend clothes, to prepare food, to offer what little comfort they could. The farewells, spread over the next few days, were tearful, solemn affairs, devoid of any pretense of glory or heroism, only the raw, aching reality of separation. Anna helped her mother prepare Mikhail's meager pack, her hands moving mechanically, her mind consumed by the inevitable parting. She embraced her brother fiercely, murmuring blessings, promises of endless prayers, knowing that the likelihood of his return was a fragile, distant hope. The day of departure dawned gray and cold. The chosen men, a somber procession, gathered on the green. Anna watched from the doorway of her izba, clutching her children, Ivan, Maria, and Alexei. Close to her, her eyes sought her brother, Mikhail, standing tall amidst the others, his face resolute but pale. She saw her parents, Maria Nikolaevna weeping openly, Ivan Denisovich standing rigid, his face a mask of profound sorrow. The district official gave a final, terse command, and the men began to march, slowly, solemnly, down the dusty road that led out of Krasnoe, swallowed by the vast, indifferent steppe. Their footsteps, heavy and rhythmic, echoed the collective sorrow of the village. There were no cheers, no patriotic songs, only the muffled sobs of the women and the profound silence of the men left behind. As their figures receded into the distance, a profound emptiness settled over Krasnoe. The sound of their footsteps died away, replaced by the chilling silence of absence. The war, once a distant echo, had arrived, leaving behind a cold void, a scar on the very soul of the village. Anna stood watching until they were entirely gone, her heart aching with a profound, pervasive sorrow. She knew that the echoes of this conflict would linger, ceaselessly, not just in her own soul, but in the lives of every woman and child in Krasnoe, forever altering the rhythm of their existence. And in the quiet depths of her heart, a new, unspoken fear solidified, the chilling knowledge that her own sons, Ivan and Alexei, would one day face this same relentless demand. This same inescapable fate, the chill of absence, was now a permanent guest in the enduring summer of her life. Chapter 6. A Sister's Keeper. Acts of Silent Support. The crisp days of autumn in Krasnoe, once vibrant with the joyous fervor of harvest, now held a chill that seeped deeper than the air, reaching into the very soul of the village. The recent conscription, relentless and unpitying, had claimed its heavy toll, tearing more sons and husbands from their homes, leaving behind an unbearable emptiness. The quiet strength of Anna Ivanovna Volkov, forged over years of enduring personal sorrow and unspoken domestic burdens, was now called upon not merely for her own family, but for the collective healing of her community. The war, a distant echo in the south, had become a chilling presence in their midst, casting its long shadow over every hearth, demanding a shared endurance. Anna moved through her days with a quiet purpose, her hands perpetually busy with the endless tasks of her household, ensuring Dmitri's comfort, nurturing her children, Ivan, Maria, and little Alexei, and enduring the subtle criticisms of Varvara Petrovna. Yet, her keen observant nature, honed by years of witnessing the unspoken nuances of village life, now turned outward, acutely sensitive to the pervasive grief that permeated Krasnoe. She saw the new lines of sorrow etched on the faces of her neighbors, the lingering tears in the eyes of wives, the bewildered silence of children. Her own heart, scarred by the loss of Fyodor and the agonizing separation from Dmitri during his own service, resonated with their suffering. She understood that in times of profound hardship, the strength of the community lay not merely in shared labor, but in acts of silent compassion, in the quiet affirmation of human connection. Her deepest empathy, however, was reserved for those families directly struck by the latest levy. She thought constantly of her brother, Mikhail, now marching towards the distant front, his fate unknown, and her heart ached for her parents, Ivan Denisovich and Maria Nikolaevna, who bore the profound, silent agony of his departure. She visited her childhood home often, finding her mother aged beyond her years, her spirit dimmed, her hands often idle in her lap, a stark contrast to the ceaseless industry that had always defined Maria Nikolaevna. Anna would simply sit with her, holding her hand, sharing the quiet sorrow, offering not empty words, but the profound solace of shared presence. She would quietly take up her mother's unfinished mending, or knead dough for their bread, her silent acts of service a language more eloquent than any speech. She knew the rhythm of their grief, the moments when a comforting touch was more valuable than 1,000 words. The power of a shared sigh that transcended individual pain. Among her most profound concerns was Katerina, the young wife of her cousin, Fyodor Petrovich, who had been conscripted. Katerina was a frail, timid woman, with 2 small children clinging to her skirts, her face perpetually streaked with tears since her husband's departure. Her small izba, once neat and orderly, now showed signs of neglect, her garden overgrown, her chickens unattended, the burden of sudden widowhood, for in war, separation was often a death sentence, weighed on Katerina with a crushing force she seemed ill-equipped to bear. Anna, without a word, without fanfare, began to extend her quiet strength to Katerina. Each morning, after her own household chores were complete, she would walk to Katerina's izba, carrying a small portion of freshly baked bread or a pail of milk. She would not offer effusive condolences, for those were often met with Katerina's silent, despairing sobs. Instead, she would simply begin to work. She would tend to Katerina's unruly garden, her hands finding the familiar rhythm of the soil. She would gather the eggs, mend clothes, or sweep the floor, moving with a quiet efficiency that seemed to impose a gentle order upon the chaos of Katerina's grief. She would take Katerina's whimpering children onto her lap, comforting them with lullabies and gentle stories, allowing Katerina moments of desperately needed respite. Katerina, initially lost in her sorrow, slowly began to respond to Anna's unwavering presence. She would watch Anna with tear-filled eyes, sometimes offering a hesitant, "Thank you, Anna Ivanovna." Anna would merely nod, a soft, compassionate light in her eyes, and continue her work. This was not charity, but a deep, innate understanding of communal bonds, of the unspoken duty to support one another in times of trial. Anna knew that in the vast, indifferent tapestry of the empire, their village was their only true refuge, and its strength lay in the resilience of its women. in their capacity to hold each other up when the burdens seemed unbearable. Her own personal sacrifices, the ceaseless demands of her household, the constant vigilance against Varvara's sharp words, were now silently extended to encompass the greater needs of her struggling neighbors. She also extended her support to young Vasily Mikhailovich's grieving mother. Vasily, a boy barely 18, had been among the first taken in the latest levy. His mother, an elderly, frail woman, had taken to her bed, her spirit utterly broken by the loss of her youngest son. Anna visited her often, bringing herbal teas, sitting by her bedside, listening patiently to the old woman's endless laments, her fragmented memories of Vasily's childhood. She would murmur words of comfort, quiet assurances that God had a plan, that their faith would sustain them, even when her own heart wrestled with similar questions. It was in these moments of silent empathy, of shared human vulnerability, that Anna felt her own spirit deepen, expanding to encompass the sorrows of others. These acts of silent compassion were not performative, they were deeply ingrained in Anna's character. A natural outflow of her profound empathy and her unwavering commitment to the community. She understood that grief, especially the grief born of imperial decrees, was a silent, isolating force, and that the greatest comfort often lay not in spoken words, but in the simple, steady presence of another. Her visits were brief, unannounced, leaving behind not just material aid, but a subtle warmth, a fleeting sense of being seen and understood. Her work on the farm, already relentless, now seemed to merge with her expanded duties of compassion. The gathering of the harvest, once solely a matter of sustenance for her own family, now felt infused with a broader purpose. She would ensure that a little extra was put aside for Katerina's children, for Vasily's mother, for any family struggling to cope with the sudden absence of a man. Her hands, calloused and weary from ceaseless toil, became instruments of quiet benevolence, their work extending far beyond the boundaries of her own fields. Dmitri, her husband, a man whose own return from war had been a testament to profound inner struggle, observed Anna with a quiet understanding that transcended words. He saw her tireless efforts for others, her subtle acts of kindness, her unwavering strength. He knew the depth of the burden she carried, not just her own, but the sorrows of the entire village. His own silence, born of war's horrors, often kept him from expressing his admiration directly, but his steady gaze, his occasional, rare nod, conveyed a profound respect and a deepening love for the woman who was his wife. His anchor, his quiet hero, he saw in her unwavering compassion a manifestation of the very grace he had sought amidst the desolation of battlefields. A living testament to the enduring presence of goodness in the world. Even Varvara Petrovna, usually so critical, seemed to soften, almost imperceptibly, in the face of Anna's relentless, selfless efforts. While her sharp tongue did not entirely cease its barbs, her criticisms became less frequent, her gaze sometimes holding a flicker of grudging respect. Anna's quiet strength, her unyielding dedication to others, seemed to disarm even Varvara's hardened cynicism, a testament to the undeniable power of pure, unassuming goodness. As the autumn deepened, and the chill of winter began to set in, the village of Krasnoe, though still bearing the fresh wounds of conscription, slowly began to reweave its communal fabric. The emptiness left by the departing men remained, a profound, aching void, but into that void, the women of the village, led by the quiet example of Anna, poured their collective strength, their unwavering spirit of mutual support. They shared what little they had. They helped each other with the arduous labor. They offered silent solace in moments of despair. Anna's faith, which had been so profoundly shaped by her own personal sorrows and by Matve's wisdom, continued to deepen, taking on a new dimension. She saw God not only in the grand cycles of nature, not only in the profound endurance of suffering, but in the everyday acts of human connection, in the quiet compassion shared between neighbors, in the strength of communal bonds. She understood that in the face of immense, impersonal forces like war, the true power lay in the unwavering love, the quiet resilience, the steadfast commitment to one another within the confines of their small village. Her life, measured by the seasons, was now not merely a testament to personal endurance, but to a profound, evolving understanding of the human spirit's capacity for light even in the deepest shadows. The unspoken sorrows she carried were now subtly intertwined with the quiet triumphs of a collective strength, of a communal spirit that refused to be broken. Beneath the shadow of the birch grove, Anna Ivanovna Volkov, a woman of profound empathy and unwavering resilience, continued her quiet work, a sister's keeper, a beacon of enduring human goodness in a world forever marked by the distant echoes of war. Her compassion, a quiet, inexhaustible wellspring, ensured that even in the chill of absence, the warmth of human connection would continue to sustain the heart of Krasnoe. Part 1 of the story ends here. Thank you and goodbye. See you again in the next part.